Hello. It's always a race during the little music for me to like be tweeting or posting. I'm like, we're live right now. But welcome to Open Source Friday, y'all. Basically, this is a stream that I do weekly, every Friday, chatting with maintainers or core contributors about open source projects that they're involved in, so that we can get more exposure to those projects, so that they can also be able to share their experience of how they were able to start contributing, and so that we can get a chance to do that as well. I just want to say hi to a couple of people in the chat. Like, I'll just highlight everyone's just saying hi, I guess. Anything else? Or where y'all calling in from or watching in from? Someone asked Nuck. Oh, someone said May the 5th be with you. That's true. It's May 5th. And someone said Nuxt or next. I think we'll answer that question soon. But just to be very clear, Nuxt is the is the framework. And hi Jen. I just wanted to say hi to her as well. But it's not all about me, so I wanted to turn the mic over to Daniel, who's our guest today, and allow him to introduce himself.
Hey, it's really nice to be here. So as you know, I'm Daniel Rowe. I'm on the Nuxt team. I lead the Nuxt team. Nuxt is a framework for building web apps, and it's based on Vue. And I can get into that in a little bit more. Before I started doing that, I had a small software as a service startup. Before that, I had a creative agency world. And before that, I did something entirely different. So this whole tech world is quite new to me.
It's new to you. That's interesting. I thought you were like embedded into. I don't know. Like I made the assumption. Wait, I'm curious. What were you doing before like tech? I don't know.
So let's see. So before, let's see. When did I start? So my creative agency was a writing agency. So it was about communicating clearly, and that was what we did. But I have a sort of tech bent, and so we started doing stuff that was we'd refine the message for a client, and then we'd do design, and then we do website building, and that was the sort of tech avenue. And basically, it was a startup, so I'd do everything. I would be designing logos and sort of Inkscape and giving mock-ups, and then I would build it. And so in WordPress, and gradually from there, we pivoted our agency, we grew our team, and then obviously pivoted into SaaS as well. But before that, I was actually a vicar, a church minister, down not too far away. And before that, I studied law. So I've done lots of different things.
You have. You sound like. You don't look like you had a long life, but you sound like you had like many different lives. Like, wow.
Well, it actually feels like it feels much more organic than that. As in every step was natural along the way. This was the next right thing to do. But looking back, sort of lawyer, clergyman, like tech, startup, it does seem a little bit odd.
Yeah, but it all led you here, and it's okay. No judgment. I also had an odd path. I was like a phlebotomist, drawing people's blood, and
Okay,
so I get it.
that is such a skill. That is such a skill. Like
I wasn't very good.
Okay. So you were the one that were like, ow, ow.
I'll highlight something that Jen said. She said, seeing a lot of Daniel this week. I'm assuming
I'm sorry, Jen. I'm so sorry.
Is that because of there's like a View conference recently?
There was Viewforge, which was it was so much fun. I would always go to that. So it was a conference. So everybody would come together, build an app, each independently. So it's a bit of a challenge. You're sort of building something, but in parallel with a lot of other people. And then there are talks focusing on different particular challenges and in sequence. So let's first, this one was building an AI-powered social media generator with a chatbot. And so my bit of the thing was, how do we build the chatbot? How do we work with the API calls that we'll need to make? How do we handle like a session, storing the sort of past responses for the user? And lots of different people were talking about different bits of this thing. And so over 2 days, people built this app. That just sounds fun to me, just sort of coding together. I think it's something that I often miss in coding, is that social aspect of it, because it's fun to share what you're doing and to do it sort of together with other people.
Yeah, it's kind of like a hackathon and a conference put into one. How come React doesn't have those type of like events? Or maybe they do and I just don't realize. Matt Pocock said, hey, 2 legends on one stream. I'm like, hey, a legend watching the stream.
Right. Absolutely. We're just sort of watching our TypeScript language from this point onwards. We're not throwing generics out there without knowing what we're getting into, because Matt might comment further.
Right. Okay. So, I feel like I went off track a lot just because you seem so interesting. But you mentioned Nuxt, right? What is your project? And then I think a second question I had, like following that, is like, and someone even asked in the comments, Next or Nuxt? And I think some people get confused at the two. So just explaining what Nuxt is, and then explaining the differences between Next and Nuxt.
So it's a perfectly reasonable question. And I've got to say there are even others. So there's Nest and there's NX. And like I feel there's quite a lot in the NXT matrix. Nuxt is a full stack framework for building web apps. It's built on Vue for client-side reactivity. It's philosophically, I could get into tech stack as well. We could talk about Vite. We're powered by Nitro on the server side, which we built actually as part of doing it, but we spun out into a framework that anybody can use. But philosophically, it's about great DX, which we think makes for good user experience at the end of the day. Minimal config, so 0 config, you can get going really simply, hopefully. But it's fully configurable. So as you need to change, the framework can grow with you. And it's also very community driven. So a lot of what makes Nuxt special is it has a huge ecosystem of modules and other libraries built around it. So you hundreds. So if you have integration, you can probably find that someone has built something for your CMS or database or whatever, and you just plug it in and don't really have to configure that or do the hard work. So it can abstract a lot of that stuff away. So I think originally Nuxt was quite similar to Next. So they were, but for Vue as opposed to React. Initially, they did similar things. So manage your Webpack config for you, handle routing. So you have a sort of pages directory, and that gets turned into the roots of your app. so handle things like code splitting and other stuff that you want to be configured, but without you having to reinvent the wheel every time you start a new project. But over time, they've diverged. I don't know how active the sort of cross-pollination is. I think sometimes we get to say at similar points without actually having taken inspiration from each other. Sometimes I'm sure we do, which is great, right? We make each other better. And we're also striving, I think, for similar kinds of things. You want great user experience. You want great developer experience. You want to, hook into some of what tech enables these days. It's interesting, but we're definitely very, very different in terms of feel and in terms of some of the stuff that we do. Maybe I'm not the best person to comment on that, but yeah.
I feel like that was clear. Like you essentially said that like Nuxt, it was started off similar as Next.js. Like Next.js was for React, Nuxt was for Vue, and it started off as very similar with handling routes and stuff like that. But then it started to diverge as like as the community grew and you all added plugins and you all focused on like creating a good developer experience. And I guess that's the beginning of handling routes and being quite similar to Next is why it was named Nuxt, because I don't know.
So React, that's an E, and Vue.
Oh, duh.
Which means, svelte would be something like, I'm not sure that would work very well. Astro could be Next or something like that. You could sort of have some other options out there.
Maybe more for Angular than
yes, Angular could be Next. Although there's actually a really great framework for Angular called Analog, which is built on the same server engine that we use in Nuxt, which is really nice to see it.
Awesome. That's true. As soon as you said it, I was like, I had Brandon, the creator of Analog, on like in February, so it's a good point. One question from the audience, although I don't know if I'm highlighting it because I don't understand anything, but I don't think this is related to you because Next would, I don't know. You tell me if this makes sense to you. Any thoughts about the Vercel integration that was announced today? Excited for ISR. You're not really related to Vercel, right? So I don't know.
Well, so basically, as part of Nuxt, we aim to support most providers with zero config if we can. And you shouldn't really need to do much to integrate or deploy to a platform. So we have zero config deployed to Vercel, which is nice. Not to have to configure something. And we support ISR. So you can configure different routes of your app to revalidate at different times, or just to be statically held in the cache, so generated on first request, and after that they persist. And so we have, it's currently configurable with the SWR flag in your config. So you do that granularly. So you can either configure it for your whole app, but you can also configure it just for specific routes in your app. And that's really powerful. So you can say things like, this section of the site should be, like the blog section should be ISR, but this other section here, actually every request we want to be server rendered. And this section over here should be pre-rendered, at build time. And so all of that is enabled by Nitro, which I mentioned before. But what was announced today was Vercel's sort of commitment to Nuxt, and so that they're a great partner to work with. And also, we've just released support for the new Vercel key value store. So that is sort of powered under the hood by something called unstorage. And if you want to explore it, and if you're using Nuxt, you just have to upgrade refresh your lock file, upgrade your version of unstorage, and you'll pull in native support for Vercel's KP, which is pretty cool.
Wow. Okay, I am behind. I did not realize that was what was in the announcement. Thank you so much. All right. My next question to you is like, what even inspired you to get involved in Nuxt in the first place? Because I know you started off as a core contributor. Why? Like, I know you said you had an agency, and that's kind of what brought you into tech. But yeah.
So basically, we used Nuxt. So I remember my journey into Vue and Nuxt, and I remember basically we were working with WordPress, but we wanted to make it better, more Laravel-like. Like to track our dependencies, for example, not just upgrade plugins by clicking a button in the UI and stuff breaks and you can't figure out why, but actually to version them. So we started bringing lots of stuff from Laravel into our WordPress, how we were doing things. And I remember listening to this course, a free course on Laracasts about Vue, because it was really adopted by the Laravel community. I think a number of key folk just adopted it, and suddenly it started going out through Laravel. So I thought, oh, this is amazing. The idea that you don't just have to have a template, a PHP template, and you sort of put static HTML, but you can actually have this concept of binding what's on the screen to the data, your data model, and actually just reactively updates. It was amazing. The sort of move from imperative to declarative rendering. And I remember going and telling one of my team at this point, he was just about to start a new project. Actually, it was maybe a day into a new project for a client. I said, basically throw it out. We're scrapping WordPress, but we're going to build this project in Nuxt. And we did. And he hated me for it at first. He had to throw his first, but loved it afterwards. And so we sort of started using Nuxt, both in the agency world, and then when I launched the SaaS product, we built it in Nuxt. And so my involvement was really, I guess I love open source because people give you things for free. People work on things and they share them with you, and they say, hey, this is my gift. And I really felt I should give back, if I can help make this better, if I can contribute back myself. Why wouldn't I? It felt really rewarding to be part of this this ecosystem, and it really does feel very relational to me, like open source. This is something someone's giving, I'm giving. That's what this is. That's what's going on here. And I really, I know a lot of people think of transaction. They feel it more like that. I don't at all. I feel like every contribution in open source for me, it's relational. It is about people. It's about giving. And that's really what I felt at the time. And so that's how I got started, really. So I just started contributing on the projects we were using. First, a module. Actually, as it happens, deploying to Vercel, we had our own arc of deployment back in the early days when it was Zeit now, and there was you could deploy a Docker image. And anyway, so I started getting involved on that side of things for Nuxt, and gradually started doing more things, building a little module here or there. And at some point, I do remember this sort of Sebastian at Nuxt just messaging me and saying, hey, would you like to be a Nuxt maintainer? And I was so honored. It was totally out of the blue. So I was not expecting that at all, but I was absolutely delighted. And actually it wasn't that much longer. I think it's just about a couple of months when he actually asked me to be part of the core team, which again, it was just a sort of, whoa, this is incredible. Because, partly because this wasn't my background also. It's not like I'm flush with, FANG companies and I've been in tech since whatever. And I don't think I could point people to some kind of proof that I'm any good. So to further the author of a framework to say, we'd love you to be on the core team. It's really validating, and it doesn't actually help hugely with the imposter syndrome, but it was really nice. And so yeah, I started. I was part of the core team, and relatively for a completely unrelated reason, I shut down my startup, and basically Sebastian reached out and said, "Hey, I hear that you might have some more time. Would you be willing to be full time on Nuxt?" And so that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. So I've been doing that now for sort of, and it was only this year that I was asked to lead it. So that was probably about January that was announced. So that's pretty cool.
Wow. So it's been, what month is it? Maybe 5 months of you being like the lead maintainer. That's amazing. We
So
have
is that
go ahead.
is that good? Good. Is it gone up or gone down? I don't know. 5 months, but it's too soon to tell.
David from Archetype said it's because you're that Nux level, and I don't know how to say that word, but I guess it's a compliment. So yeah. Like I think the proof is, I know you said there's no proof, but the proof is in your PRs and your desire to give back and be community focused. So I think it's there. I'm curious, like, were you, I know you had that like motivation to give back, but were you scared to like do your first contribution or anything, or you were just like, I don't care, like this is regular to me?
Was I scared? I was not scared, I don't think. Although I think that I do and I don't know whether this is, I also live very much in the moment, so I'm not maybe very good at accurately recalling what I was thinking in the past, but I do very much feel that the tools of review and PR are very relational. Like when someone clicks request changes on a PR, I'm like, oh, goodness me, I have been rejected. Like, I mean, and I try and realize, no, it's not that. And actually, I have started using it myself, not in any way, just to keep track of like what's going on in the list of PRs, rather than, but it can feel so personal. Like my PR wasn't good enough. And that, like, the whole dialogue of back and forth, particularly when you're creating a PR. Actually, this happened only the other day. I opened a PR. There's a completely new framework. I was writing a talk, was going through the docs, just figuring out how to go. There was an error in the docs, and I opened a PR to fix that mistake. And basically had a long conversation with someone who said, no, it's right. And in the end, I convinced them that no, it was in fact wrong. So they opened another PR, which is identical to mine, and theirs got merged. And I have got to say, like, that it didn't feel great, did it? And like the whole, so anyway, I think that when you're creating that first contribution, whether that's a PR or whether it's issue triage or comment or helping out on a Discord server or something, I don't know, there's a lot at stake. It feels like there's a lot at stake, and you can really take it to yourself and feel quite, it can have quite a personal feel about it. How someone responds, they might think they're just looking at your code or just commenting on your use of const versus var versus lat or whatever it is. But actually, it really I think it probably would quite affect me, what someone actually says or how they respond. So I don't know if that probably doesn't answer your question at all, but I don't remember feeling scared or anxious, but I'm sure how I was treated had a huge impact on the fact that I was able to continue contributing, because, you know, we're people. We like to feel valued. We want to be seen and recognized for who we are. And I think, you know, I felt I was. So
Yeah, no, that was an amazing answer. I think it was interesting. You know, a lot of people say at first they were scared to contribute to open source. I love how you were just like, I'm just gonna go in with no inhibitions, but then you still recognize that like it can be scary because we're putting ourselves out there and in the open to essentially for our work, our intellectual property or whatever, you know, like our art to be criticized. But it's really not about them like critiquing you, it's about them like helping you to improve. And I like that you said it mattered on how they treated you, because somebody can request changes and do it in a negative way, but someone can also request changes and be like more empowering for you or something like that. And Jen also said the proof is in your ability to break it down for beginners and bring others along with you. Um, I could already see that just from you talking with me. So I And Nuxt was Nuxt your first open source contribution before, or I'm sure it wasn't your first PR because you were doing stuff before that, but
It might have been. It might have been. I think when I looked back, I think I built an app. I sort of taught myself Ruby on Rails and built an app long time ago, and then basically had no tech work for years and years. And then I think it might have been Nuxt. But it also could possibly have been something to do with WordPress and the WordPress stack that we were using. It might have been that, because we is a great community. It was the Roots community. They have Bedrock, which was for dependency management, Trellis, which was an Ansible-based deployment sort of preset, and other stuff as well. So it could have been that, but I can't tell for sure. But I did at some point look and find my first PR to Nuxt, and I'm pretty sure it was something like I corrected a typo in some documentation, which I think is often a way people get started, not because docs are easier, but because docs are the first thing you encounter about a framework. So if you're encountering the framework, it's because you're probably reading the documentation. And if something isn't clear to you, that is the very, very first thing that you could possibly fix about it, because you haven't even got to the point of using it. I don't know. I certainly think a lot of people seem to start contributing with the docs, but it's definitely not the entry level sort of in terms of value. It's
sometimes it's really needed. Translating docs, fixing errors, like those are underrated, undervalued things. Not like you said, it's not entry level. It's still helpful. And I guess Jen was asking me, so mentally prepare yourself for after the few comments I read that we're gonna jump into the demo. But I guess Jen was asking me what was my first open source PR. Actually, it was open sourced, just like you. Before I think you wrote it right here. Yeah, before I joined GitHub, like I did an interview and my presentation was all about like how I've never contributed to open source before, and I didn't feel like, and I felt I was giving suggestions of like how GitHub could make it more approachable. And then basically they hired me, and B. Dougie was like, if you're going to work here, you should probably contribute to open source, and made me contribute to his project. And similar to what Daniel said, like at first I was scared, but because the community was so welcoming and like really kind, I was like, oh, this isn't scary at all. Like they're really nice here. And then David from Archetype said, one of the first big open source PRs I worked on was a massive feature to do relational schema inference. The maintainers kept asking me to do more and more on it with the promise of merging. Oh, that's like actually really discouraging. But after months, they ended up scrapping the repo. However, honestly, felt burnt out for months after the maintainers make a big difference in terms of how that experience it goes one way or another. I'm glad you're still stuck in open source, because that would have made me like that would have just turned me off from it. But let's jump into a quick demo just so people can see how Nuxt works, what it does, whatever you want to show off.
okay. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, so here we are. This is a minimal Nuxt project. I've not done anything other than install the dependencies. And basically, you start a new project by running Nuxi init my app or something like that. And that gives you this. And then I've just installed the deps. The first thing you might do is start the dev server. You'll get a message telling you to do that when you start up. This is the Edge channel because I've got a script ready to start an Edge channel version of Nuxt, but you'll see numbers that are a bit shorter when you run that command. And basically, out of the box, you get just a sort of welcome to Nuxt page, and that's what you'll get. And that is rendering this app.view file, and it's really quite simple. So you could say hi there, and you basically, this page is what your Nuxt app is. And everything beyond there, Nuxt has quite a lot of features, but it's all additive. So as you use the feature, it's enabled, and the imports are put in place for you. So you basically don't have any of the code cost or the JavaScript cost of features that you don't use. One of the things that people often want to do is enable routing. And basically, all you really need to do to enable routing is to create a pages directory. So if we were to stick this in a pages index, then it's going to become that index root of the app. And if I then hit something else, it's going to be a 404. It doesn't exist. So I could create another page. I could create, say, an about page and maybe stick some content in it. Nuxt does a lot of other things as well. So it, I could say create a plugin that might run. Let's see. Plugins, something. Nuxt plugins run when you're starting the app, and they're a great way of sort of setting up some code. So you might do something that has to be set up when you start your application, and sometimes you might want to return something or make it globally available to the rest of your app. So you might do something like this. You might have some kind of auth that you set up that wants to be used everywhere, and you could do that like login. You're going to have something more going on than that. But anyway, you can have a Nuxt plugin that you set up. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that we have a TS config there by default. And it's actually extending a generated TS config. And you don't really need to know TypeScript or worry about what's going on behind the scenes. But we like to make all of what we enable, all the features that Nuxt offers, discoverable and usable through your IDE. And the way we do that is we use TypeScript. You also get the benefit of type checking. If you do type check your app, you'll get errors if something goes wrong. But so, for example, this thing that we just exposed to our app, if I were to go and actually try to use it like this, actually, I don't need to say TS, but I will. I could actually say something like use Nuxt app, and I'll get access to auth. It's auto-saving as I type, and it's not a valid JavaScript at the moment, so you don't need to worry about that. But you see, actually, I have type-safe access to this thing that I've just added into my app. Nuxt has other stuff as well, so things like middleware. I might want to have, I'll call it auth as well. I might want to have some kind of middleware that's going to check that I'm authenticated. So something like if to.path is admin, and then you might add some more checks to make sure that authenticated or not. We could use that new auth object we added in, but we could just return take us back to the home page, something like that. And then what I could say here, I could actually use it. So I could say this page is going to have some middleware that applies to it. And that middleware actually, oops, I don't know if you've got that. It's actually typed for me. So it knows that that middleware could be auth or nothing else. And if I get it wrong, it's going to give me a little error and tell me that that is not a valid middleware for the app. I don't know if I'm overplaying the types. I love it. I really think it's great.
Oh, you are not. I think this is really interesting. I know we have TypeScript people here in the that are watching, so I'm sure that they're loving it. Someone said string I can't even say it. Interpolation is fun. Sorry, cannot read. And then David said just waiting on TypeScript to enable access to FS from within the type system so that no generated code is required. So I think it was interesting. I was curious. Nuxt has dynamic routing as well, right? Or
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'll just go back to the pages. So you can do things like maybe you create a blog and you want to have a sort of a dynamic page which is going to depend on the blog ID. And so you can actually get access to it like this. You can use these square brackets, and you could even do something like put a dynamic pattern like that, and it's going to it's only going to match it if you hit blog entry -21 or whatever. So dynamic stuff works, and even a bit more complicated ones. So if you want a parameter to be optional, you can use sort of double brackets like that. And you can have nested roots. So maybe you have like a page which wraps some child roots, and you can do that as well using the file system. This isn't meant to be a limiting factor, though. This is meant to make it simpler and easier to understand where the page that's rendering what you're looking at comes from. You can actually fully customize it using that define page meta macro that I showed earlier. So you could actually put a custom path which could use any kind of regex, and actually you could say, the ID can only be numbers, something like that. You could also add aliases. So this should also be served by blog hello or whatever. And so you have full control to do whatever you want. But by default, that file system-based routing is a really nice way in. It means you just don't need to configure things, and it gets sort of set up for you. I didn't mention up to now the fact that we have a server integrated. So you can create server routes, and we use a framework that we built called H3, which is an event handler-based framework. So you can just directly return JSON, for example, and it gets so you could do something like this. Hit that endpoint. What is it? API A. It's just going to return JSON for me, and it's going to set the content type and whatever else you might need. And you can then use that throughout the rest of your app we call it an isomorphic way, which sounds very confusing. But what it means is on the client, and we get type safe access to the endpoint, and also end-to-end type safety in terms of the data that's coming back from it. What that isomorphic thing means is that on the server, this isn't a network request. It's just a function call. We directly hit the function, which means you don't have to hit the network layer. It's really fast. And on the client, it becomes a network request. And so you don't need to worry about how it's happening. It just works. We have things that handle like getting the data from the server to the client. So you could do something like use fetch, which is going to ensure that if this data was fetched on your initial request, it's going to be passed through and you don't make another request on the client side. So there are lots of nice features, which are exposed as composables in Nuxt 3, which is it's a really interesting pattern that Vue 3 introduced. And it works really well because it means that only the features you use are actually in your bundle. In Nuxt 2, Nuxt has been around for a while, but in Nuxt 2, you sort of had everything was there to start with, which meant that even if you didn't use it, you still had code that was just around. Whereas in Nuxt 3, it is very much a case of if you don't use it, it's not there. It's not in your code base.
So Nuxt is more like lightweight and performant because of that.
It's really lightweight. So going from Nuxt 2 to 3, we had something like a 30-40% decrease in bundle size, which is nice, right? That's the direction we want to be going in. But yes, so lots of stuff that I could talk about. I could tell you about. We have layouts, for example. You can create layouts that are shared across your app. I could talk about some of Vue's interesting features. You can, for example, take all of the data that you use on any route. We can extract it at a build time if we're pre-rendering your pages. And then you never need to actually hit those routes at runtime. It's put into a payload, which can actually then just be downloaded as a sort of static JSON sort of file, which is quite useful as well. And we just released an experimental feature where you can even include like complex JavaScript objects. So I did a stream recently where we encoded promises So you could return a promise on the server and get the value on the client. So it's like streaming. So you basically render the page, and then when the server promise resolves, then your client data updates, and that was very, 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 very cool, because it meant you get that initial response immediately, but the request fully happens on the server. It doesn't happen on the client. But I don't know, that's a bit in like crazy detail, but that was a lot of fun.
That's amazing. I mean, I think this was a good starter to
This may not have been a starter. This is sort of diving into the deep end, but basically Nuxt is designed to be simple to start with. If I don't make it complex by telling all the secret features that I haven't chatted about yet.
No, but I think this made people get like excited. Like Archetype said, "Wow, that's amazing." Someone was saying, like TypeScript is life, embrace it. So I'm excited. Like I didn't realize that all these features. Like I didn't realize how powerful Nuxt was. So this is cool.
Thank you.
And somehow we've already been speaking for 41 minutes. It didn't feel that long.
It really didn't.
I wanted to jump into some more questions, and if people have questions as well in the comments, feel free to put them. I do see one that I often ask, so I'm just gonna ask it right now. Is like, how can people contribute if they wanted to contribute to the Nuxt.js repository?
So I would say that we do our best to label things if you want to get stuck in. So we have issues that are marked as good first issue. Those are great because generally we give that if we think there's enough information there for you to make a go at it without having a lot of background in the repository. It doesn't mean it's an easy thing to do, by the way. It's not like this is easy code, but it means you should have enough there to get going. A lot of the issues marked documentation are good to get going because they often, again, have the information in the issue. So if someone's they've said, this is a bug, and then someone said, it's not a bug, we need to document how this thing works. And then they say, it works like this. But if you can then pick that and actually make the PR, you will be making so many people's lives easier. And then there are the things that are explicitly marked as bugs. And often they'll have a priority as well. And those can be great to pick up. I mean, I love it when I see that happen. But the key thing from my point of view is, as a maintainer, I love it when people contribute. Please, you should feel free to message me. You can get in touch on Twitter. You can get in touch on probably not GitHub. I mean, you can obviously open an issue or a PR, but you can message me on Discord. If you have questions, you don't understand the right approach, you have an idea, I really am happy to do that. And if I don't respond, it's not because I'm not happy. It might be because I'm busy or something. Ping me. I'd really be delighted. And I don't think that's just me. I think a lot of maintainers are just really very happy to be contributed by people who want to be part of the project and to help out.
Yes. Oh, so like for folks, I wish I could put the link in the chat, but we can't. And not on GitHub, they like make asterisks for any links just because of spam issues. So I did put the link on the screen. It's github.com/nuxt if you wanted to contribute to the repo. And I love that you said that you're open to helping, but you also gave that disclaimer like, y'all, maintainers are busy. They want to help, but they're also busy. So give them that time to be able to respond back to you. And don't get too demanding, but they will. Or just reaching out to someone within the community. I found that really helps me when I'm in an open source project and I'm stuck. I feel like that was the difference of me not contributing to starting to contribute is like I started actually interacting with the other people within the community, and then I was like, okay, now I have clarity on what's going on within this repository, and I feel part of the community, and I feel like I can ask for help if I wanted to. This is an interesting question, I guess. Someone said, please tell us a bit about, I don't know what you could say, but please tell us a bit about core members, insiders, contributors. I think big community is a major part of Nuxt.
So we do actually have a governance document. It's an open repo called Nuxt/governance if you want to look at this is the official rules. I mean, I guess with any open source project, it's not like an external body, but this is what we're aspiring to. Have a look there. Basically, the core team are a smaller team. I think we're about 6 at the moment. And there's contributors are, it's basically anyone who contributes. So you don't need a stamp or anything to be counted as a contributor. If you are contributing, you are a contributor. There's this insiders group, which how would I describe that? It's just a group of people who are involved in making stuff with Nuxt. So they are key contributors to the framework, ambassadors or content creators, library authors, or module authors. If that is you, let me know, because you'd be very welcome to be part of that group. We don't. It's not meant to be exclusive. It's meant to be an opportunity to share ideas and help each other out. But yeah, those are the sort of the core team, the insiders and contributors. But I really don't think. I would just say that I think there's a lot of. It is really a team. It's not. We've all been contributors, maintainers, team members. We know what it's like to be involved at different stages, and depending on our life circumstances. So I don't know if that answered the question.
I think so. I hope so. If they wanted more, they could comment. But I feel as though it did, and I didn't realize that insiders was a thing. That sounds cool. I know that you said that like becoming a maintainer to a contributor kind of felt like maybe more serendipitous to you. But do you have any like, and I know everybody's experience is going to be different on a case-by-case basis, but do you have any advice of like how someone could go from contributor to eventually becoming a maintainer within a project? I know it wouldn't be guaranteed because it's not always going to happen that way, but just any thoughts on that?
So I would say, don't approach it with that idea of wanting to be a maintainer in a given project, because I think that can be really frustrating if people don't recognize you or offer that to you straight away, which is probably not intended in any kind of negative way, by the way. But in retrospect, I think the thing that is and also as a maintainer, like if I'm looking at people contributing, I think I really value qualities like being able to have initiative, sort of coming up with great ideas on your own, wanting to make something better. Actually, that's really important too. Having a vision that is, you believe in the project too. This is something that you are committed to also, that you really want to be a part of because you see its value and you're there. So I think that is important. So I would let whatever your contribution is be your reward for it, because that is very much what it is for me. Like, and I think a lot of other maintainers do it because you enjoy it. And the fact is, if you enjoy it and you're committed to it, then that you're much more likely also to be asked to be part of it, to be part of the core team, because who do you want to be driving something forward? It's people who believe in it. It's people who are committed to it, and people who make it better. But obviously, there are a million caveats. And just because you are all of those things in a project doesn't mean you'll become part of the core team, because it's about like the gaps as well. What does the core team not have? Who do they need to bring in? So a million asterisks there. But
yeah, I think that's all fair. Yeah, do it because you you're passionate, not because you're like, I'm doing this so I can become a maintainer. Like that's maybe the wrong mindset and will lead you in the wrong path. Um, my last question before I move into some of the fun questions, and I know I didn't really follow any of the agenda that I sorry, but
I take full responsibility for that.
I just thought you were so interesting, and I'm like, forget these questions. Some of my other question to you is just like, what are some challenges that you faced moving into the maintainer role, and maybe even some that you didn't expect that you would face.
So I think, and again, this might be more about me, but it's the things that I have to watch out for in myself are kingdom building. So wanting to, because there are lots of projects doing similar things. Pick any area, any project, any open source library. There are other things out there doing something similar. And then people will start saying things like, oh, I prefer this other solution. And it is so hard, but it is so important to basically quash that voice in you. Basically, that's great. If another project does well, that is really good. That is a challenge. Like that's hard all the time because you want your own thing to be great, right? You want it to be good. But it's not a pie. Like we're not all fighting for slices of pie, or we're fighting to make the pie get bigger. That's what we want. We want everything. We want all of us to get better. And so that is something I think that is a challenge. I think it's also a challenge to be too easily, to put too much of your own ego into something, I find. So if I say something or I do something and I'm wrong, it's really easy to double down and be like, how dare you question it? No, this is how it will be. But all the time, I find I am wrong. Someone says, oh, this is a bug. And I think, it's not a bug. You just don't know how to do that. And actually, when I investigate, I find actually it was. And sometimes that even happens when the person is a total idiot. They say something and they're really rude and whatever. And I can just easily get into, and then I have to say to myself, actually, step back, engage with this at a level of, take it seriously. And actually, the person might not be an idiot. And actually, the way they're coming across, actually, isn't that a little bit more about me and how I've read them? And actually, a little bit about maybe where I was that day. So I think, weirdly, the challenges I've found with being a maintainer are less about other people and more about me. I don't know whether that matters anyone else, but I would say that. I would also say that in comparison to having an agency or a startup, open source leadership is a lot. It's a lot more fun in some ways. It's also a lot harder in other ways because you don't have a team you pay who will do what you tell them to do. Everyone involved in the project is there because they believe in it, but also they are totally unconnected. Like they might do anything. They might say they'll do something and not do it. It's the way we move forward is because we believe in something and because we are compelled by it, which is also why it's more fun. But at the same time, it can be a little bit like herding cats. I think herding cats.
Yeah, leadership is hard. David from Archetype said, definitely the less stressed I am, the easier it is to deal with negativity. And I even relate with the whole, like, when people are like, I like this project better or whatever, like, I'll write a blog post and be like, oh, GitHub Copilot does this or GitHub Codespaces does this. And then someone's like, well, ngrok does the same thing. And I'm like, I'm not talking about ngrok here. But I don't need to feel that way because, like you said, there's a seat at the table for everyone. So it's not about like who is better or whatever. It's just like there's an option to do this in this framework as well. And I could see how if you're in a negative headspace and then someone says like there's a bug or they seem like they're annoying to you, you're like, but it does seem like a growing pain of leadership to be able to like separate your headspace or your feelings from like being able to lead a team, especially like you said, when you're not paying them, because it doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily commit to the work. They're not obligated to yeah. Um, I'll switch into some of the non-technical, just the fun questions that I normally ask guests. And the first is, what is the first programming language that you've ever learned?
So that would be, I'm going to date myself here. That would be QBasic, and then Visual Basic. So that was basically where I started. And it was basically magic. Like you could draw some stuff on a screen and make the QBasic was basically text adventure type games, and it was all sort of go to this, and you could clear the screen, CLS, clear the screen. But it was very, very basic stuff, so to speak. And then Visual Basic was you started drawing buttons on the screen. You could click them, and people complain about JavaScript now, but like that you'd compile that app, and this was ages ago, and it would be 5, 12, 20 meg or something like that. So they were huge things. But again, it was magic, because I remember I made all kinds of little apps. There was one, I taught myself to code when I was about 12 or 13, and with Visual Basic. And I made one app that would basically looked exactly like the Windows login screen. And so I thought, I'll get my parents' password. I'll come down, I'll type it into the computer. And it was designed, it would basically sort of throw an error and then close itself. So you would then have the real Windows login screen. So they might not even know. It would just look like it failed. And I wrote another app that basically would, you could hit a hotkey and it would restore like a window, like a screen. And I basically used to, instead of doing homework, I used to read Project Gutenberg ebooks. It was amazing, and I had so much fun. My childhood may not have been very interesting, but I loved it. It was fantastic. But I wasn't allowed. I wasn't allowed to read. I had to do my homework. Calculus needs to be done. So I would basically, I press the hotkey, ta-da, homework back on the screen. So like it was cool. So you could basically come up with an idea and you could do it. And there was just very little friction or barrier to entry. I later learned, I think, C++ as like a class in high school, but that was so much more work. There's so much more friction. Obviously, it's more of a sort of proper programming language, but I'm glad that wasn't my first experience. But I'm glad my first experience was much more magical, of sort of thinking of an idea and how can I make this happen.
You're a way smarter 12-year-old than me. I learned Visual Basic when I was like.
You did. You learned Visual Basic. Okay, Visual Basic twins.
I did not know what I was doing. Like you're like it was easy. I'm like, was it? I was very confused the whole time. I think I made like a basic pizza app, and like that was the only thing I understood throughout. Like I think I took classes, Visual Basic 1 and 2. Everything else after that pizza app just went over my head. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I did learn it, and I think it was a good starting point. My other question to you is, if money wasn't an issue, how would you ideally spend your time, whether it's job-wise or not job-wise?
So, honestly, I'd probably do some very similar things to what I'm doing now. It's what is this suggestion? I think so. If money wasn't an object, I would probably be sort of in nice places, somewhere hot, maybe, or skiing in the winter. And I would be coding in the evenings. I'd be skiing in the mornings, that kind of thing. And in terms of what I would be doing, I'd probably be doing exactly this. I'd probably be hacking away on Nuxt. So I like it. I do this because it's fun. I think a lot of maintainers do, because honestly, I think there are a lot of other alternatives that would. So I'm full time. I do some consultancy, but most of my time I'm maintaining Nuxt, and I'm supported by sponsors. and I could probably get a much better paid job. But I love it, So there we go. So it's not a real question. I think if money was no object, I'd be doing what I love, right?
Yeah, I'm noticing that every time I ask this question on Open Source Friday, people are like, "I'd be doing this." I'm like, okay. My other question to you is, how do you pronounce? I don't want to give away the way I say it. GIF.
I think there's no question at all about this. It's GIF. Hard G. GIF.
You and the other
I'm sorry.
I say GIF.
You say GIF? Oh no! I'm sorry. I hope I haven't alienated you.
No. Someone said
it honestly never occurred to me to say it anything else. So
I don't know how I started saying it, but okay. Very last question, and it's okay if you don't have an answer to this question. But what is your favorite Beyonce song?
So I would say it's I would say it's probably All the Single Ladies.
I had a feeling you might say that.
I don't know what that says about me, but it's an amazing song.
It is. It's a fun song. I loved all the different interpretations that people did when it first came out, like all the guys in leotards and whatever on SNL. But this was a really great conversation. Before we go, do you have any last things you want to maybe promote or leave the audience with?
Ooh. What to promote? So, okay, if you are looking for an alternative to Twitter and you want to check out Mastodon, or maybe you have checked out Mastodon, check out elk.zone. It is a web client with apps for mobile as well. That is hopefully a nicer experience, and definitely worth. I'm on the team there as well, and we've got loads of contributors. I think over 170 contributors so far. And if you want to be one of them, you're very welcome. The app's built in Nuxt, so you can give it a try. Check out Magic Regexp, which has just had a release today with a great PR from a guy called David Tai, which integrates. It is magic. It compiles to normal regular expressions, but basically it's powered by TypeScript, and it will protect you from a lot of the issues that you can face without care, because JavaScript and TypeScript don't protect you. Like, you can run a match all command on a non-global regular expression. There are lots of things you can do, and this basically can solve that for you. And check out one more thing called Fontaine. It basically it's spelled Fontaine, and it helps get rid of layout shift that occurs when a web font loads. So if you have a sort of fallback font like Arial, and then the web font loads and your page goes like that, you'll have a Web Vitals hit, and this basically is automatic. It injects a bit of CSS into your project. It works on Next, on Nuxt, on anything, Astro, Docusaurus, whatever. And it basically will get rid of some of that, so with no cost to you. So that's worth a checkout as well.
Wow, you maintain a lot of things. I don't know how you have the time. So just to reiterate for everyone, go ahead and check out Nuxt itself. If you wanted to contribute, github.com/Nuxt/Nuxt. Also, if you wanted to understand the whole governance body and all of that, they have Nuxt/governance. Also, elk.zone if people are into Mastodon, like you said, and you can contribute. And then we got Magic Regex. I don't remember everything, but I guess it makes Regex better. And then also check out Fontaine. So I mean, people can rewatch this stream if they feel they missed something. Thank you so much for your time, Daniel. This was a really enjoyable conversation, and I learned like a fountain of information from you. And also, thank you so much to the audience. I always love how engaged they are, like the comments they add in and the questions. I feel like it makes it more fun. So it's not like we're just talking to each other. It's like, oh, there's other people here that we could chat with. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and catch us next Friday for another cool one. I think it's going to be about fashion, if I remember correctly. All right, thank you again, Daniel, and we'll head out. Bye.
Thank you.